All right, so welcome back. Today we're going to continue on looking at relations and functions. Today we're going to look at how to evaluate a function graphically or algebraically. So just some notation, I'm sure you've seen this before, but y equals f of x, that's how you read this part here. F of x, it's not f times x or anything like that. But basically x is your input value and y is going to be your output value. Keep in mind, anywhere you see an f of x, you can basically replace it with a y. They are equal or they're equivalent to each other. So let's start with looking at evaluating a function graphically. So we have our v-shaped function here, and we want to find f of 0 to start. So f of 0, remember that inside number is your x, so we're inputting 0. We want to see what the output is. So how you do this is you go to your graph. We're on the x-axis. So you go to 0 on your x-axis. So that would be here in the center. And you want to ask yourself, how far up or down do I have to go to touch my graph? So I would go down, and I touch my graph here at -2. So that would be my output or my y value for that x value. F of 2. Let's try another one. So remember, that's your x value. So you're inputting 2. You want to figure out your output or basically your y value for that x value. So you go over to 2 on your x-axis, and you want to see how far up or down I have to go to hit my function. So I mean, in this one, I don't have to go up or down at all. I'm on my function at that x value. So my y value would be 0. How about you give the next one a try? What would f of -4 be? All right, so assuming you went over to x equals -4, you'll see you don't have to go up or down as well. So you would also have x or a y value of 0 or an output of 0 for that input. And then let's just look at one more. So f of -8, we would go all the way over the -8. And then we see how far we have to go up or down. In this case, we got to go up, and our y value is 4. Okay. A little bit of a challenge question. Sometimes they might tell you what f of x equals. So remember, they're telling you basically y equals 2. So you want to figure out what x values would give you a y value of 2. So how you can do that is, you don't have to draw this, but I kind of like, at least in my head, I look at y equals 2. So that would be 2 above the x-axis. And I just kind of look, where did my graph touch it? Well, it touched it here, and it touched it here. So if I kind of just look, what x values give me that? Well, I've got -6, and it looks like I got +4. So those would be my x values. I'd actually have two answers. There's two x values that give me that y value, and that's okay. Like I said, remember, sometimes you can have more than one input that gives you the same result. Like there's multiple ways I can turn off this computer. I can hold the power button, I can click and shut it down. So this is how you evaluate a function graphically. You'll see some of these questions in Delta Math today. The second thing we're going to be looking at is evaluating a function algebraically. When you evaluate a function algebraically, essentially you just plug in your number for x. And you just want to be careful when you're plugging these in. I would recommend you borrow or use a red calculator. If you're trying these on your phone, sometimes with the parentheses, it can be a little bit tough, but you're welcome to try if you'd like. But remember, they're giving us basically an x value. So essentially, I'm just going to plug this into my function here. So when you plug it in, you always want to put parentheses around the x you're replacing. So instead of putting an x, I'm going to replace it with a -3. And then you can basically just put this in your calculator, or if you want to work it out mentally, that's fine. But -2 times -3 would be 6, plus 5 would be 11. But I highly recommend you use a calculator because some of these functions might get more complicated than others. How about you give this second one a try? So if you're plugging in 5 for x, what are you going to get? Okay, assuming you gave that a try, you'd have 5. Replace that x with a 5. So you'd have really 5 times 5 minus 3. If you work that out or plug it into a calculator, that would be 25 minus 3, or you would get 22. And you can put this like whole, just so it's clear, you can put this whole thing in your calculator. You don't have to do bit by bit, or you can, but you should be able to put that whole thing in your calculator, no problems. These bottom ones, we'll see sometimes you might have some exponents. You got to be really, really careful with these. So if you have an x value of -1, when we have two x's, first off, we're going to replace this x here and the second x. But when you type this in your calculator, if you're working this out, you really need to put parentheses. If you don't put these parentheses, you will get the wrong answer. Sometimes you might get lucky, but especially when you have exponents, it's going to mess you up. But if you plug this in a calculator, or if you just work this out, -1 squared would be +1, -2 times -1 would be +2. You should get +5 if you enter this in correctly. But like I said, make sure you're putting those parentheses. And how about you give this second one a try? What if you plug in x into this function? What are you going to get? All right, so if you gave that a try, you would have 2 squared plus 2 times 2 plus 1. So if you plug this in, or if you work it out mentally, depending on how good you are with your mental math, you should get +9. And that's how you evaluate a function algebraically. Basically, you're just plugging in your input or your x value in, figuring out what your y value equals. So let me know if you have questions. Hopefully this was helpful, but I'll be kind of walking around seeing how you're doing with your delta math today.